Okay, so we have already started. Hello, guys. So we are here at Sheraton in New York after Scala days. We're waiting for Martin to join us at some point, but before we start the meeting, I'm going to recap on what we have discussed in the last meeting and clarify next step. So in the last meeting, we were discussing about the future evolution of Scala 3, how we are going to organize this process. We agreed on organizing the changes that have been merged together, and then studying and iterating on the batches themselves. So these batches will have features that are related. So for instance, today we have two batches to study. The first one is mostly syntactic. The second one is mostly addition to the Scala types and yeah, the first batch, and Master will take care of the second one. The last one. And we agreed also on getting involved in this process. So what we want to do is to open contributor threads so that people can comment on the addition tools and give us the so the which is similar to what other programming language communities have done, and this process is usually known as why wasn't I? Or personally, I didn't get the time to this. I have 1 month in which the community will, in which we'll be hearing whatever the community has to say, and we'll act on their feedback. So this is more or less how the process works and how we want it to work. And today we are here mostly to do three things. The first one is we need to review the by name implicit zip by Miles. I think the Miles has some updates on that front. Then secondly, I will introduce the second batch, which is going to be a very general description of what it is. All the kind of description of the features can be found on the Dode website. And the third thing is we're gonna, like Martin is going to introduce the three types batch, which Martin will elaborate a little bit more afterwards. So let's just get started with the first item in the agenda. Before we do, are we all on the same page here? Yep. Good. So Miles, I will just let you introduce whatever changes you've have now.
So I think there were really very few changes. I made some slight tweaks in response to some of the conversation we had the last time we discussed it in depth. I think probably the most significant change is that Martin and I had a kind of an offline conversation about it. We came to the conclusion that in terms of the desugaring, there was actually no need for the dictionary entries to be lazy themselves. They're used in recursive positions, always under a by name argument, which means that at least in the kinds of scenarios that we really care about here, that there's absolutely no additional requirement for the vowels themselves to be lazy. So that's one change. The other change was that I did a little bit of tightening up on the description of the divergence checking algorithm proposed. I sort of ran through that with Martin. He seemed comfortable with it. I have a kind of TLDR version that I can try out on people if necessary. But I guess the big question is do people have any specific things that they'd like to raise, because I mean, basically, it's unchanged since the last time we discussed it. I mean, there's just some relatively minor tweaks.
I think so far it's looking good. No specific comments.
Sorry, I couldn't quite catch that.
Looks good. No comments from me. That was Eugene.
I didn't really have anything.
Nope, same.
So I think there are no comments here. Do you have any other questions, Miles?
No.
Okay. So would you say that the proposal as it is right now, it's finished and ready for voting?
I think it's finished and ready for voting. Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe this would be like a nice moment to vote. So as usual, we're gonna go through the committee members and say if you agree with the change or not. So it's a yes or no vote. I think that nobody is missing here, so.
Sorry, I completely missed what your last 2 or 3 sentences, so I have no idea what we're doing right now.
Sorry. So what I was saying is that we're gonna start the vote now, and we're gonna.
Okay.
Or so just yes or no. Then we'll go through all the committee members and noting that we have a quorum. So, yeah. Virgin?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Martin? Okay. Miles?
Yes, for me.
Yes, for me as well.
Okay, so we have a unanimous yes.
Whoop, whoop.
So,
Yes or no?
SIP approved. Good job, Miles. So the second item in the agenda is the syntactic batch, as I call it. This batch basically is about removals. So the removal of delayed initialization, that's the first one. Then there is the removal of also procedure syntax. So now there would be only one way to define methods that return unique. The third is the removal of XML literals, which are now available in a library set. They are not in the library. The fourth one is auto-application. So the need of adding parentheses whenever you have them. And that would be it. And syntax will be more consistent then. And then the removal of early initializers. Those are changes that Dotty has now merged with the I believe that some of these are also dedicated in strategy. What is
We still in parts of it. It's still plus I don't have it fresh in mind, but we'll get there. I think the main challenge here in this batch is delayed init. I think that's the one that will need the most discussion. It's not really like purely a syntactic, a thing, right? It's also something that is hard to emulate with other things. So, otherwise, I don't see any issues with the deprecations.
I found out that Wikipedia uses the early initializers in their whole code base everywhere.
Really?
But there's a way around it by essentially it is the most concise way to express what their use case, but there's another way around to handle it. So I think that shouldn't be a blocker. But it was a bit of a shock when I saw that.
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was called early initializers. I just thought it was a really nice way to express their programs.
Right. So then we would still remove early initializers and then find another solution to their problem.
They can do it with a little bit more boilerplate. They can essentially what they did was they used the early initializer to initialize a bunch of fields and then use those fields in the actual parameters. So that way they could essentially get a let expression in the parameterization. So
wow.
Yeah.
Are there plans for Scala 2.14 to have trait parameters, or the?
Yes.
So I guess that should mostly fix it. I mean, lots of use cases for early initializers.
I guess the most standard one doesn't sound like this one.
Yeah, but, okay.
Otherwise, they're very rare.
So I think delayed init is used much more. And like we have like, you know, specs and other test frameworks. We have UI frameworks. I'm just scrolling through the contributor thread. Companies saying that they were using it. So Scala test, specs, Scala FX. So I feel like
we could hold back and see, evaluate more what possible alternative solutions are.
Yeah.
Right now, we sort of have just collected feedback, but not really started thinking about how one would.
Yeah, I agree. I think the cost of removal outweighs the cost of just keeping it like as the worst case scenario. If we have to keep it, that isn't great. But I think if we remove it, I think there's a lot of poor things that would be, you know, that we have to all invent their own solutions unless we come up with a replacement. So I mean, I agree. It would be nicer to have an actual replacement, and until we do, I don't think this one, given its widespread usage, is ready to be dropped.
I would say let's put it on hold. And,
sure. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
What would be the rationale of it? I think it's a trap. Well, it's a sort of complicated to handle it in the compiler. It's an annoying special case, and so it's complicated to handle in the compiler. It's an annoying sort of magic class, and the other big objection is that essentially you have you tend to have fields, but the fields are not initialized because it all goes in the initializer and they local variables. So all right, it collects everything in the module. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So essentially, if you're able and want to exploit it, you can construct.
Sebastian, do you mind if I mute you? Oh.
Great. So then we agree that we should just remove delayed initializers from this batch. And
we'll remove it from the removal batch. Yes.
Yeah, and then we will just look for more feedback on the other features that we want to remove.
But noting that the intent.
So actually, I have about the other stuff, and in particular the XML literals.
Oh no.
I mean, as the Scala.js representative, I have to officially voice what I said since the beginning, but never really during a SIP meeting. That it's going to be really annoying to the Scala.js ecosystem if XML literals go away, even if they're replaced by string interpolation or something, because every other language that compiles to JavaScript has some sort of support for JSX, which is this embedding of HTML tags as is in the language. And Scala.js had an edge because it had JSX before everyone else, and now it's going to disappear. Where finally it's becoming something that's widely accepted in the JS environment. So that's it's actually a pity from the Scala.js side point of view.
So JSX is just something that is on top of XML literals. You express.
I mean,
right?
JSX is like the XML literals in Scala. It's syntax that desuggers into function calls, and so I think the problem with XML literals is not so much their existence, but rather the fact that they have some really weird edge cases that make them relatively hard to implement and also to use in some cases, especially around namespaces. But I'm not sure the solution is to remove them.
Would it be possible to express JSX with Scala?
Sorry, come closer.
Would it be possible to have conversion conversion between XML and then Scala tags, and then use Scala tags to represent the ESX in iOS. I think this is the point of which ESX is.
Sebastian, can I suggest when you're not speaking, could you mute yourself? I think you're taking everybody else's level down. Try again, Jorge.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you. Nothing. It's all right. It was a bad suggestion. Yeah.
But so can somebody say what that is exactly?
Yeah, so as I showed Jorge, let me pass my phone to you as well.
You can show the camera.
Yeah, but I guess the viewers have Google, right? Yeah, so it's basically like XML literals from what I can see. You can write raw HTML tags in your JavaScript programs.
Okay. But I still don't see the burden to write XML triple quote. I mean, that just seems so minor that for so special a use case. And I mean, the problem is that if you do that, then transitively, the Scala spec contains the XML spec, and I think that is terrible. I mean, how can we ever claim we are a small language if we say we have all of XML, which is definitely a huge language in the language. So I think that is a terrible situation.
I didn't actually pay.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the spec.
I agree with that. Yeah, as a counter to that argument, you could actually just spec it and say, well, this is the expansion of it in terms of this syntax turns into these method calls, but we're agnostic as to what they mean. Like the XML spec talks about namespaces and all that stuff, but ultimately our spec just needs to say, hey, when you write these pointy things, you get these method calls, and you can use that in a library to implement XML support if you wanted to, but you could even say we don't default. Anyway, that's like the counter argument. I don't know if
I think the point stands. I mean, what harm does XML triple quote do?
That's a different question.
Extra 9 characters, right?
Yeah.
I mean, well, maybe think back to 2004 when it was when they were added in the first place. I mean, I guess there were lots of people doing work on kind of interesting languages for doing XML processing. It definitely seemed like it was worth it at the time. And I guess people who are still working in those kinds of contexts, and of which I guess there is a fairly heavy overlap with the Scala.js community, it probably still matters. I mean, maybe it doesn't matter so much to us anymore, but then we're not working in that space now.
In 2004, it looked like XML was essentially the one and only standard. Now it seems completely weird to have a language that has native support for XML literals and not for JSON literals.
Agreed. Yeah.
That I want also Tom.
Yeah. So I mean, the point in Scala is to have a generic solution that essentially lets you write these things, and I think string interpolation is the right way to do it. So.
Well, on the other hand, there is still an idea to special case some form of literals, for instance, quotes, right, in the new metaprogramming proposal.
That's not literal. Or literal.
Well, you could say that quotes they are similar to XML, right, or to other interpolators. After all, quasi-quotes they're implemented as string interpolators.
Yeah, but that's not quasi-quote. Yeah, quasi-quote is string interpolators.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that they're similar. So there is a precedent of treating some form of processed literals. So
no, because these are not string interpolators. The quotes are definitely not string interpolators. They take fully typed terms and actually list them.
So here's a dumb question. I mean, is half of the problem that people have, and that makes this seem like such an unpalatable change, is the delimiter characters? Is the fact that it is actually that double quote character which is appearing, which makes it look as though these things are very much second class. Is there some way of supporting an alternative? I mean, basically keeping the semantics identical to string interpolation, but just using a different delimiter character for the strings. I mean, it might seem like that's a kind of fairly trivial thing, but that might actually be half the problem.
And to remove quotes from the discussion, because right now it's about string literals. So I think I would say let's talk about quotes with splices another time.
I would say that the most contentious change here for the users is that people using XML literals in the library, they will not be getting syntax highlighting from the IDE, and therefore it will be also more difficult to modify the XML inside the quotes because you will not have IDE support. The IDE will not know about the XML.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
it doesn't know, it wouldn't know right now unless you add some kind of specific support to how do you modify things. So maybe this is something that we could talk about with IDE vendors and try to improve the user experience of using XML from the library side instead of just keeping them inside the language.
But wait, IDEs can look inside string interpolators, right? They understand holes in string interpolators.
So usually when you go to, they could, but they don't right now. So if you use XML, they would just look as if it was just a normal quote, a normal string. They don't give you any kind of support to modify XML nodes and add and remove.
Oh, the XML part.
Yeah, the XML part.
Yeah. Okay.
So here, Miles was saying that he thinks that one of the most, problematic parts here is just the syntax of the quotes. I think that the most problematic part is just this IDE experience that would be lost. So maybe you can, just get some data on what's the actual problem, and also try to see if people agree with this change or not. Because so far we don't have any data.
I don't. Yeah. Okay. We can throw it out. But I mean, again, for code blocks, nobody minds writing triple back quote Scala around code blocks. How hard is that? People say, oh, this is terrible. We can't write quoted codes anymore. And now we're sort of making a fuss about the same thing for XML, which I believe is probably much, much rarer than people writing code blocks everywhere. Right?
Sebastian, maybe you could comment on that. What exactly do you find appealing? Do people find appealing about JSX?
I wish I knew. It's just, I mean, apparently it's very convenient for a lot of people. I guess it helps front-end developers to kind of feel at home in the thing, and
here again,
I mean there is a lot of habits in the front-end world and things that people like to keep the way they do it, and somehow JSX has been one way that the JS community has accepted that it might be a good idea to generate your DOM from the JS codes, because at least you can still use your HTML tags, right? And so it has had a wider acceptance than the bare method calls, even though the bare method calls are less boilerplate, but they don't feel like you're writing HTML. And so, I mean, yeah, that's my guess.
I think that by far the most appealing thing about XML literals for people is that they can just copy paste code that they find in the internet without any kind of modification into a Scala file, and it will work. So I think that if this is one of the most the kind of things that people really like about XML literals, we should just optimize for this case and have some kind of converter between XML to the XML codes that we are talking about, or even potentially Scala tag nodes, and try to, I think that the Scala tags would be better would be a better medium to kind of like represent this XML DOM that we are talking about here. So it's also what other frameworks like Slinky do right now. They just use Scala tags instead of just using XML.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems like, we're discussing syntax again. You could easily add quotes around everything with XML tags, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't seem like a complicated feature to implement. So, I mean, I'm in favor of.
That assumes the IDE implements an XML parser. So I thought the whole idea was that Scala gets simpler. But if you think about the compiler as being that thing that provides, language semantics to other, not only to compile, but also to the IDE, then the compiler still includes.
Well, but IntelliJ, for example, already lets you paste Java code into a Scala project, and it says, "Hey, would you like me to convert it to Scala?" I would argue pasting XML into a Scala code and converting it to Scala by putting quotes around it is a lot easier to implement. So, I mean, there's lots of language-specific, convenience things. I mean, I'm just arguing both sides, and I think,
IntelliJ has
is JSX used for filtering or matching as well, or it's only for emitting tags?
I just wanted to put things in perspective. So JavaScript is a huge language, right? So just because JavaScript has it doesn't mean that we should have it. We don't strive to become a huge language that encompasses all the features that are out there. And I think we have a perfectly good working thing with string interpolation. And well, maybe the IDE could throw it in. I would predict that once people get used to it, nobody's going to have a problem with that anymore. And actually, people are probably going to like it because it makes it clear what is XML and what is Scala. Yeah. So I think we're really putting putting the storm in the teacup here.
Just to make it clear for the audience, there is also like a working rewrite right now from XML literals to XML quotes that was done by Alan, I think. Yeah. So there is a Scala fix rewrite that would do this process for you. I don't know how well it works, but I think that Alan did a good job at this rewrite. I think that the use of JSX is mostly in React, right? Things like React, so that you can return DOM elements from there. If I remember correctly, right now, well, there was a presentation about Slinky, which is a new framework to do React in Scala.js. And what Shalach, the creator of the framework, does is that it just uses Scala types. So I don't think it's a big deal for him, at least, that XML is going away, and he has been doing a lot of work around this area right now. But in any case, what I propose here is that we try to open a thread about this, see what people think about it, see whether our assumptions about what's good or what's bad are correct or not, and then we will decide on this. That's okay with everyone.
Fine with me.
I'm fine with that. Can I just try one last thing? I just want to pick up on something Martin said. You said everybody's happy with triple backticks Scala or triple backticks XML. I'm wondering if because I really do think this is largely it's a syntax, it's an aesthetics problem, it's what people are used to. What would you make of the idea of supporting triple backtick identifier as an alternative delimiter for essentially string interpolation? I mean, something which people are familiar with. It basically, I mean, there's no reason for that to have any semantic meaning different from string interpolation, but it's the kind of thing that it kind of looks more like what people are currently used to. Any thoughts? It's still a general mechanism. You can apply it to quasi quotes, to any other kind of string interpolator.
You mean like your docs and Bash, or? I
mean, like in Markdown.
Oh, I see.
So as an alternative to XML triple quote, it's triple backtick XML. I mean, just a purely syntactic difference. I mean, so there's no semantic import here at all. But this immediately looks like something very, very familiar to people.
One issue that I would, one potential conflict is that would that then terminate a triple backtick in the Markdown? So if it makes it harder to mix it with Markdown, then that's really not. The other thing is to say, well, yeah, sure, but we're now used to this one, so again, string interpolation is not that big a deal. So I wouldn't change it now. That
wouldn't mess with the triple quote.
And triple quote is pretty established for lots of other things as well. So the other thing is we would spend another character for string interpolation. So we have actually single quote for characters, double quote for string. So use the backtick as well. Grabbing ASCII characters for maybe one.
Well, how about we unspend the backtick on for symbols and use it for string interpolation?
Backtick for identifiers using this.
Oh yeah, right, of course.
Yeah, we need them for that.
Yeah, sorry.
From the audience, so there's someone asking if it would be possible to extract XML literals as a compiler plan. So I think that
You have to modify the parser, right?
Yeah.
But the parser already have the hooks to find the Scala XML?
It's super ugly and messy and complicated, and I would love to get rid of that.
Right.
Because basically the parser goes into an XML parser and then trusts the XML parser to call back at the right time and go back into the parser. It's super ugly.
Yeah,
I really would like to get rid of that.
It is indeed that.
I really would like to. I mean, basically, it's the only dependency the compiler has on something that is an external library and one which is not standardized. There are many XML parsers and many XML standards, and we have problems that way. So all of this, it really says no, don't touch it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is why the Scala meta parser depends on fast parse, just because of this.
Yeah.
And we couldn't bother to write our own XML parser, obviously.
Yeah.
Great. So before we proceed, we need to decide on what's going to be the process for dealing with these batches right now. So usually we always number something when a proposal when we are first reviewing it. So right now this would be the moment in which we would vote to number this proposal, this batch. So I propose that we follow the procedure, the protocol, and then we number this batch as something official. It will be basically like a proposal. I think it will be SIP 36, and it would include several changes, and we'll do the same for the upcoming batches in the future. And then we will make a decision in the next meeting. Do we all agree on that, or do we think that that's a good way to do it?
Should we number the controversial ones separately?
Yeah.
Okay.
So those will be basically
Okay, so we're
right
pulling
now.
those out. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine then.
So I propose that we keep XML literals in this batch though, and then we remove the late initialization from it. And then the late initialization will merit another independent proposal that will require a little bit more of data to support removing it from the language, if that's what we intend to do, or otherwise replace it with something else.
I suggest maybe we move XML literals to another thing, because the rest we pretty much unanimously agreed it's a good idea. But
I didn't have the kind of I didn't perceive that it was so problematic. So if we all agree that XML literals should also be independent, let's do that as well. So then the batch would be basically procedure syntax, auto application, and early initializers. And XML literals and early and delayed init are going away.
XML literals would also be proposed now, but on a separate number.
Right. Yes,
yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
yes.
Yeah. So let's just vote really quickly about all these proposals if we want to number them or not. Okay, the three of them.
I think we can just say that we are fine with that.
Yeah, I think
we don't
I think
need to
that let's just
officially.
do that.
Okay,
So
it's fine.
Somebody proposes all in favor.
Yeah.
all in favor?
Yeah.
Yes.
That, yeah, cool.
Miles, I
Okay.
presume yes as well.
They said yes. Oh, great. There's another question, rather a comment by Kevin Walter. He says that IntelliJ IDEA already supports to let the idea interpret the content of a string as a different language and have it highlighted that way. Yeah, so what I was proposing before would be that it would also give you the XML support that it gives you in XML files inside the quotes themselves. And that's something I think it doesn't support right now. Great. So let's just move to the second batch. So Martin is going to introduce this batch. It's mostly about additions to. Yeah.
I realized it was now. Can we?
Absolutely, it's here.
Okay.
So these were the ones we agreed on.
Okay. Good. So we have the new types, intersection types, unit types, type lambdas, implicit function types, dependent function types. That's the 5 we had here. Yeah. So
guess that there is no controversy around type lambdas. Let's start with the simplest one, in my opinion.
I would like to suggest, the framework how we discuss those things, right? First of all, do we care about interoperability between Scala 2 and Scala 3? So do we want Scala 2 to use type lambdas? Will Scala 2.14 get this capability? So that's one thing. The second thing is, well, it seems like we're converging on tasty as the interchange format between the two compilers. So do type lambdas or any other features, do they get a separate node or whatever entity in tasty? And in that case, will the Scala compiler understand it? I mean, the Scala 2 compiler. So yeah, just let's keep it in mind for all of those types. To see how well they can be integrated into the existing ecosystem. So yeah. Well, speaking of type lambdas, yeah, let's just go ahead and discuss them. Sorry for the interruption.
Would there be any plan, for instance, to merge type lambdas into 14?
See, none of you are at my keynote. Yes, they're in there.
I will link it.
Okay.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, no, type lambdas are. We'll add those to 14.
Great. That's probably the one that's controversial.
Does this, by the way, what kind of, is there any catch there? Is this basically a shorthand for this, hash lambda trick, or there may be additional?
No, it'll just be.
Okay.
It'll be the polytype.
Shorthand goes away.
All right. I saw at .epflch on the page, I saw that it says that the type lambda is basically a shorthand or an equivalent of a name type declaration. So instead of when you have type T of say U equals U, you can write a type lambda just like that.
Miles, I suppose it's you.
Big fan of type lambdas.
Yeah, so what I was saying is that there seems to be a similar relationship between vals and defs, right? So you can say that val anonymous function is similar to methods, but there is a slight discrepancy. So is there any sort of cache like that for type lambdas?
But it goes the other way. So a parameterized type def is represented as an unparameterized type def with a type lambda on the right. So it's really like taking val as the single primitive one and treating def as a derived thing. So on the type level, it's precisely like that. So we only have unparameterized types, type aliases and abstract types, and right-hand side can be that.
That's already how it's represented internally in Scala C as well.
Sure.
So it's just syntax for a type you already have.
That's right. Right, the polytype.
Okay. Well, thanks for the clarification.
I guess I'm happy with this proposal as far as it goes, but I can't help but observe that it doesn't cover all of the ground that people are looking for. I mean, it doesn't cover everything, for example, that say Kind Projector provides.
What is missing?
I suppose what I'm concerned about. There is nothing in the type lambda. At least the description on the in the Dotty documentation, which I find objectionable. It just seems to me that there needs to be some consideration of how it's going to interact with partial application and also how it's likely to interact with extended function types, which I guess is the next bit. It kind of feels like I can imagine that this part of the language getting not necessarily more complicated, but certainly becoming more sort of deeply integrated with other bits of the language. And I guess I'm not entirely sure I can see that there's see the obvious points at which we kind of extend this definition.
Okay, so let's take them one by one. Kind Projector, what's the gap? I don't see the gap between type lambdas and.
Well, kind projectors is going to give us syntax for partial application, for instance. So I mean, one approach you might take to partial application is to allow, say, type lambdas with multiple parameter lists, multiple type parameter lists, for instance. That's certainly been floated on a number of occasions. That's not present in the description here. It's not present in the dossier implementation. Okay, without having made some decision on what we're going to do about partial application, it seems maybe premature to say that this is all we want to do.
Oh yeah, but this is one piece of what you want to do. No, type lambdas definitely can have multiple type parameters.
And they can be curried, but they don't have like, but you'd have to spend an extra arrow between the parameter list.
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
want
sure.
to
So I mean, kind projector gives you the convenient wildcard syntax, which would be nice to have, but the problem is that essentially there's this original thing that we use the underscore for the wrong thing and as essentially an existential in the types. And if we wanted to do this for the language consistency, we'd have to sort of get it back and make it a function, make it a lambda and use it maybe the question mark, but that means switch the underscore and the question mark. Raises an interesting migration path puzzle. So that's the issue with kind projector. Otherwise, I would be very open to keen to add it. But I think for the moment we're just deciding on the type lambda, which is sort of can express what type projector does, but sometimes at the price of a slightly larger term because you have to lambda abstract it.
I guess. I mean, I suppose I'd like to know how it interacts with partial application and how it say interacts with that in the context of type inference.
You take the things that are not applied, you pull them out in a lambda, and you have a full application with the type variables you lambda abstracted, like you do when you write a lambda term in essentially when you do.
Is that something that can be? Is that something that either is or can be inferred? I mean, is this something which would have to be done by hand?
Well, in some situations it can be inferred, in others it can be done by hand.
Okay.
Really, yeah.
So were you assuming that something akin to SI2712 that is going to essentially deal with the problem as far as we're prepared to accommodate it? Yeah. Okay.
Another change in the batch that will be interesting especially for people working a lot with shapeless and this kind of type level libraries will be dependent function types.
Mm.
It's an improvement over the OPS. Well, it allows you basically to express what the OPS pattern allowed you in Scala 2. But that's a very exciting change, I guess, for many in the audience or people watching this video. Is there any discussion with regards to dependent function types? Or is there any kind of...
Well, I guess, again, I'm wondering, I mean, there's no place in a type lambda for any terms. So, for example, if we wanted to express a type lambda which accommodated a dependent type, how do we do that at the moment? I guess the answer is we can't. Is that a problem?
You mean now dependent functions from terms to types?
Well, I suppose in general, we've got functions from both terms and types to types, haven't we?
That's currently not expressible, right? Because you also always first have to apply the types and then you get to the terms.
Right.
I mean, that would be a generalization, but yeah, it's the first time.
It is a hole in our quadrant. Yeah, so we have function from types to terms, from terms to terms, from types to types, but not from terms to types.
Right.
Doing so would give us essentially a full higher kind of dependent language, which would be nice, but I'm afraid we can't do this sort of just by a decree. So this is sort of
I appreciate that, but we do already represent a lot of these things internally. I mean, for example, the for sum, which is on its way out, does have a mechanism to allow you to express a type with a dependency on a value, and that's kind of
like an upper bounded type, an abstract type upper bounded by singleton, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I say it's a hole in the matrix, and if you can fill it, it would be good. But I'm saying it's not something we can
Right.
we can just do by fiat. So somebody has to sort of do probably a lot of research work to see how it interacts with everything, what exactly we want to do, how to express it. So that's a big project if you want to do that.
Well, okay. I mean, I appreciate that we can't do everything all at once. Are we comfortable that the proposal as it stands is something which we could imagine smoothly extending in Scala 3.1 to accommodate dependencies? I mean, are we painting ourselves into a corner with something which it solves the current problem, but maybe it's not something which is going to generalize nicely in the future?
So there's one thing to think about, and that's that so we need different syntaxes, but do we need a different syntax for functions from terms to types and terms to terms? Same thing happens for, do we need different syntaxes for functions from types to types and types to terms? That's what we currently have with the polymorphic function types that Guillaume has worked on.
Yep.
Where essentially it comes down to what should the syntax be? And he picked a singular arrow, which will probably likely clash with something else. But that's not on the agenda of this proposal. But we will have a similar issue that we say, well, function from types to types and function from types to terms. So essentially, are they distinguishable by the context? And the answer is no, in general not. So we have to find different syntaxes. We might as well be systematic about that. So that's the only possible issue for further extensibility that we should keep in mind.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess my take on this is I'd like that to be at least considered as part of accepting this part of the proposal.
We consider this now if the research is not there yet.
Right.
So I guess that this could be something really nice that could come in a future release of Scala 3, but not for Scala 3.0, which is the kind of
sure
we're discussing about now.
I think in the end, this is pretty much related to what Georg is doing, sort of trying to get something like liquid Scala, like liquid Haskell going. And I think this is very interesting work, but I don't see it making it into Scala 3. It's just not.
I think, I mean, liquid Scala, that's going a lot further. I mean, I think, I mean, we already. Okay, no, I'll park this for now. I think what I would need to do is come up with a concrete example of something I think which is valuable and interesting and isn't really accommodated as yet by this. And I want to reassure myself that it looked as though we'd be able to kind of generalize in that direction in future. So I'll take an action on myself to try and come up with a few interesting examples.
A bit more of context. Georg is a PhD student at the Great Power.
Yeah, one quick thing about this is because you're following up on this, I think since we have singleton types, and you could always just represent a term dependency as a dependency on a singleton bounded type, abstract type, that would be kind of like an abstract term, right? Just like you mentioned, we do this encoding now for existentials. So that could be one way out.
Well, do we want to just anticipate that we're going to need that and provide syntax for it straight away? I mean, because that is going to be slightly clunky.
Well,
I think could be.
I think this stuff is exotic enough that we can live for a while with actually experimenting with this through this mechanism, and then if it does really, become more ubiquitous, then we can come up with syntax for it once we know what the actual, use cases are. Otherwise, we're just going to design something without really knowing how it's going to be used. So I think that's a lot harder.
Yeah. Okay. I agree on that.
Actually, I think the thing we should do is we should look at what Guillaume does with the polymorphic function.
I agree with that as well. Absolutely.
Make sure that goes well with our proposal for type lambdas.
Yeah. Agreed.
that they're happy with, I'm sure we can generalize that then to the term level. Like dependent function types, dependent type lambdas would then be analogous. So I think we should make sure that this works, that we have a good syntax.
Agree. 100% agree with that.
Okay. Great. Good point.
Yeah, very nice discussion.
Also something that we discussed with Miles before the meeting started. So do we even need dependent function types if we have method types? We have dedicated syntax for method types. Why not just have one thing?
Method type. Oh,
the thing that Guillaume is working on right now.
Well, calls it that, but it's really polymorphic function types. So they are functions. They're still function types. They are value types that map into something.
So they're not the direct analog of method type. That's Scala. Are they?
I think this is. I don't want to derail this conversation, but I think that is
very much like dependent function types, but it's a bit more complicated because dependent function types give you still a base function type and then an apply method that gives you the full treatment. So polymorphic, you can't do that because you can have many types. So it's basically a base marker trait and then an apply method, but it has an apply method like a function. So it's not a method type. It's a thing that has an apply method, which is the real thing.
Well, clearly we have to wait for that proposal to shape up, or experiments. Yeah. Thanks.
Great. Another addition in the batch that is worth also discussing about is implicit function types. Martin was telling an anecdote of how this kind of use case that implicit function types would enable is heavily used in the Facebook project, right?
Yeah, everywhere. It was funny. I was writing this example. I was showing this example in the WG 2.8, and there was Andrew Kennedy, who's actually working on hack for Facebook. And he was showing me the Facebook code base, and he says this pattern is literally everywhere in our code base. So
I think that's an interesting.
Because of course they're everywhere. They have this thing to say, well, we need to know who can see this thing or that thing.
Great. Is there any discussion that you'd like to see here with regards to implicit function types? Questions?
The same thing that I brought up before. Will we have support for that in 2.14? Jen says no, right?
Not planned. No, I mean, I think there is a whole, coherent set of new types that make sense as new features for 3, and are like the essence of 3. That I don't see how we would backport that. I mean, of course you could, but I don't see the value of doing that.
Fair enough. And then I guess implicit function types, they get their own node in Tasty, right?
I mean, internally it is representable already.
Yeah,
you're basically just giving syntax to it again. It's just like type lambdas.
It's the way a function type is just essentially instance of the function 1 to 22 or XXL now.
Yeah.
There is a shadow thing of implicit function classes.
Oh, so it's like a magic-based trait or something.
Well, yeah, you can say that they're just in that sense magic in that they don't really exist. They're raised to the real function classes at some time.
Can these implicit function types be then somehow used from Scala too? Let's say you have an implicit function type based API. Is it usable, or even with a bit more boilerplate, or it's just?
Well, it's a function type, so from Scala 2, that would be seen as the same type.
So a regular function that you can apply and use.
But it would and I believe the apply would actually be implicit, so that could maybe be seen. I mean, there might be scope that it can be used, can be called implicit in Scala 2, but I'm not sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, then I would like to suggest that the proposal includes the details, the interop with Scala 2.
I think I'd also like to see some discussion of the sort of interaction between implicit and dependent function types. I mean, there's a little bit of discussion on the I think it was on a PR, or was it on the contributors thread? I can't remember. But I mean, it's dependent function types sort of inevitably allow you to name arguments in the type. It definitely seems that it would make sense to do the same thing for implicit function types, at least in some contexts. and also the idea of mixing dependent and implicit function types. Again, makes huge amounts of sense. So I guess I'm not entirely sure I'm convinced that having the two features listed separately, I kind of think it's leaving an opportunity for us to actually miss important interactions between the two. I mean, I think the idea of having an extended notion of a function type which corresponds fairly directly to a method type, I think that's a hugely important idea. I think that would be a great thing to appear in Scala 3. And I suppose I'm concerned a little bit about implicit, dependent, polymorphic, the three things sort of moving forward somewhat in isolation. I think I would really like to see something both in the implementation in Dotty and I guess also in the spec, in the SIPs for them, that demonstrates how these things interact and basically how they fit together. I think that would be a very good thing to see.
Right. So discussion seems like a very good starting point for this batch. So we need to start wrapping up now, and I guess that some of the things we've already said now for implicit function types will also apply to inner types and function types, especially when it comes to that to interrupt. So to the best of my knowledge, intersection types and union types will not be available in STAR2 either. So I guess that we'll do like a test for compatibility or just like prohibit their use. Maybe we could do some kind of labbing on the STAR2 side, but there were also some technical problems with that. But it is a interesting discussion that we should have perhaps in the next 3D iteration, unless there is someone here that wants to go into deeper detail.
I would propose this as part of the tasty SIP. Like the tasty SIP is going to cover all those things, and I mean in every individual like type SIP we need to talk about that. But I think ultimately it needs to be connected. They all need to be collected. I mean,
I agree with you.
How do we decide on the features one? We don't before the tasty SIP.
Do you think it would make sense just to
well,
explain?
I mean, I think we can number both, right? I mean, we're just numbering things together, right?
Right.
So,
just numbering.
Yeah.
I think there will be dependencies between different SIPs. I think that's fine.
Yep. All right.
So this tasty SIP was I'm probably out of touch. This is the first time I hear about it. What's the timeline for this?
I think this is the first time I hear about it as well. There is only like maybe Adrian is asking for having some kind of SIP about tasty and how
I think
it will represent all the kind of encodings in Scala. So maybe that's something.
Well, I mean, we talked about the tasty spec, and I think that those are the same thing, right? So,
right.
I mean, I think it's maybe by the end of the year or something like that, but basically need this to start 2.14 development. So,
yes.
So I would say as soon as we have that, we can start really, implementing it. I mean, is already implementing, a lot of this for technology. But this needs to ultimately result in a spec and then completing it.
Absolutely.
How do we see the work of the SIP committee if features like union types and other kind of types are blocked on the tasty SIP? What kind of decisions do we make in the meanwhile?
Are they blocked though?
Catch-22.
I mean, I don't think it really blocks. I think we can all. I mean, we can. Let's say the tasty SIP doesn't get accepted, then we can say, well, let's go back and figure out what we can do here. But I mean, well, yeah.
Because of the Scala to compare.
Well, yeah. So I would be uncomfortable accepting anything without the Scala to compatibility story, even if the story says, well, not compatible.
I would disagree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say no. That's not the point. That would tie a millstone around that. I would categorically say no. That should not be it.
Well, there are new features.
Some of them are compatible, some of them are not. But we will not go on with the two branch. It will be a clean cut, and so if we should do this, then we would miss all our deadlines and milestones and would take forever. So I say. I would personally absolutely refuse to work on that.
I guess
I think if the system committee wants to do it themselves in the timelines, that's fine. If they would use this as a blocking thing, then I would say, look, I say that's very.
It's important that we try to unblock things and make progress, especially gradual progress. So I think there is value in figuring out a way to.
Well, I mean, I do think there is value to a Scala 2.3 compatibility story, but we already have it. There's a subset of both languages that is compatible.
So what kind of subset do you have in mind?
So that's the current subset. So one thing we should work on is to, let's say, identify a subset of the language and maybe put that in tools to enforce that you keep that subset that can be used in 2 and 3. That subset exists because right now all our tools are written in that subset. Compilers do that. So that shows that it's viable. And write it. But it just means you have to restrict yourself. You cannot, for every new feature, say, well, we have that. But I also think make 14 delayed forever. So we think that there's a lot of work went into these features. Backporting on 14.
Yeah, like I already said, I mean, we should all agree on what we think, defining set of features. I took a first step whenever I talk about it, and we can talk about that more.
Yeah.
But the principle is that not everything. I mean, like that we never do that. That 2 versions have the same set of features. Just like then, why are they different versions?
As I said, the compatibility story may be, well, it's not compatible. The place that I'm coming from is, do we want code bases to cross-compile between Scala?
Sure, within the subset.
So there is a subset. But for instance, well,
you cannot use.
If you want to be in that subset, as of now, don't use it.
Okay. And so, if those new features they're not, core to some idiomatic DODI, for instance, you write simple DODI code and then it emits, advanced stuff. So in that sense, you wouldn't be able to cross-compile. Yeah, I would like to prevent that. So
no, that's absolutely
okay.
Great. So let's just have a very quick vote on numbering this. Are we all in favor of it?
Yeah, sure. Less numbers though.
Same.
Sorry, can you repeat exactly what we're voting on?
Favor with numbering this proposal or this batch?
I think he wants to know what.
Oh yeah. Sure.
Yep, same.
Okay, great. So it's a unanimous vote then. Okay, so let's just finish the meeting right now. I'd like to thank all the people watching this video and all the people asking questions as well in the YouTube live. And we'll have another meeting next week. And next month. And just to remind you about the process that we want to follow to get involvement from the community and get questions. We'll have some Scala contributors thread posted by next week, so that you can give us feedback and we'll act on that feedback in the next meeting and address some of your questions. And it would be also very valuable if you try to give us any kind of data of the uses of the features we want to remove or any kind of insights that could be valuable to make a decision in all of these batches. So thank you very much, and let's just keep in touch. Goodbye, friends.
Ciao.